Hey everyone, Dave Keller here with Market Misbehavior. Hope you're all doing well. I published a video about a month ago called Choose Your Own Adventure, What's Next for the S&P 500, and basically presented 4 different potential scenarios for the S&P over the next 6 to 8 weeks and asking people to vote on which of those scenarios they thought was most likely and why. Given the volatility in Bitcoin, given arguably the rotation from distribution phase to accumulation phase, I thought it'd be a perfect time to do a Choose Your Own Adventure for Bitcoin. So today we're going to present 4 different scenarios and ask you to choose your own adventure for Bitcoin. So when I was younger, I used to love the Choose Your Own Adventure books. I don't know if you guys have read them or not, but if not, you should get your hands on some used copies of them. I don't know if they make them anymore, but basically it was pretty awesome because you got to read a book, but you led the story, right? Your decisions actually impacted the characters, impacted the flow of the story, and the book could end in many different ways depending on the choices that you had the character make. And I love applying that same sort of thinking to the markets. I find a lot of times we fall into number of behavioral biases, including the narrative bias, which is you have a particular narrative and you basically are focused so much on that you ignore evidence that messes up that narrative for you. Confirmation bias, which is you decide whether you're bullish or bearish, and then you start gathering evidence as opposed to gathering the evidence and then making the decision based on the weight of that evidence. So what we're going to do is do a Choose Your Own Adventure for Bitcoin. I'm going to present 4 different potential outcomes for Bitcoin over the next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks. And again, the time is a little fluffy. I'm just thinking more about the price behavior and where we trade relative to significant previous highs or lows. I'd love for you to put a comment below the video and tell me which of these 4 scenarios do you see as most likely and why. Before we get to that though, if you like this sort of thinking about investor decision making, behavioral finance, technical analysis, trend, momentum, breadth, sentiment, all of that good stuff, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. It'd be great to have you along this ride with us. Also, give the video a thumbs up if you appreciate it. We would very much appreciate that back. Don't forget to put a comment below the video and tell me which of these 4 scenarios you see as most probable and why. Let's get to the charts. So we are talking Bitcoin, and you're going to start with the 1-year chart of Bitcoin. I left a little open area on the right so we could draw in some different scenarios, but just so we're all oriented to the same chart. Basically, my chart of Bitcoin goes back to August, September of 2020. And if you remember that, 10,000 was a key level for Bitcoin. It traded above it, kind of came down to test it in September of last year, and then rotated really an exponential rise up to 42,000, which is a key point right here in early January of this year. From there, it pulled back to around 28 to 30,000. Really, 30,000 is what we'll probably call that because that's where we bounced off a number of times. Those 2 price levels, by the way, come back a lot. So remember those, 42,000 and 30,000. From there, we broke right above 42,000 and continued this next big push higher to the ultimate high just below 65,000. From there, the pattern changed. And a couple things changed from the first quarter to the second quarter of this year. And look at all these things. In the first quarter, and really from the fourth quarter of last year, we had a pattern of higher highs and higher lows, right? Every high was higher, the lows were higher as well as we continued upwards and upwards. That changed. All of a sudden, you started making lower lows where you're undercutting the previous low and lower highs where you're undercutting the previous high. And then we continued that transition. And from there, we've seen a fairly consistent pattern of lower highs and lower lows. The RSI is a classic measure of momentum. It basically just shows you how this asset normally trades, what the price normally does, and what the price is doing right now relative to that average. So if the RSI is above 70, shaded in green, that means it's overbought. It's gone too high too quickly. If it's in the red color, shaded red, it's below 30. That's oversold, meaning it's gone too low too quickly. But what I want to focus on is the divergence. January, February, March, April, every month we saw a new all-time high in Bitcoin, and you saw lower and lower price momentum, right? So that's a classic bearish momentum divergence where the market is doing one thing, but the momentum is telling you something different. What that tells you is even though the price is going higher, the momentum is coming out of it. It's less and less bullish. There's less and less upward push behind every new high that is made. Eventually, the price came to match the negative momentum divergence. You can see you continue to make lower peaks in momentum, April, May, June. And I recorded a video on this channel a couple months ago where we focused on that bearish divergence and this transition from accumulation to distribution phase. So if you missed it, check that out for sure. Now what has happened is we've settled into a range, and this is what May, June, July, and now early August have looked like, is you've settled into the range between 30,000 at the lower end and 42,000 at the upper end. I mentioned those levels back here in January. I told you they would come back, and this is where they've come back. So what's happened is we basically settled into these ranges. It matches up pretty well with some Fibonacci levels. If you take the low at 10,000 in September, you take the high just below 65,000 in April, you can see 38.2% of the way is at 43 to 44,000. 61.8% is just above 30,000. So it lines up fairly well with the range that we've had. So based on that range of 42 to 44,000 and 28 to 30,000, 31,000, you can see these blue or light blue and light pink shaded areas, and that's the source of those general ranges. It's been a pretty good estimate of where we've been. Now, things have changed here in the last month or so. We can see that the RSI has gone from a bearish trend of lower peaks to now more of a bullish configuration, actually reaching the overbought condition, actually rotating above the level of 60, which is pretty important. So the momentum is no longer giving you a negative momentum trend; it's more of a positive momentum trend. We've stopped making lower lows, and we've actually made a higher low in early August. We've stopped making lower highs. We've actually made a higher high. So in the last couple of weeks, we've now had a low that did not get back down to the support around 30, and now we've hooked back and gotten to new swing highs. Importantly, we're back above the 200-day moving average for the first time since May. So that is where we're at right now. And my question is, which of these four scenarios do you think is most probable? And here's where the choose your own adventure really comes in. Option one is the bullish scenario, which is basically this is the beginning of an uptrend that continues on. We retest the highs around 65,000 to give it some wiggle room. We'll call it like 60,000 plus, I think, is the scenario, which is basically we at least retest the previous highs. We get into the range of these previous highs here, which is sort of in the 60 to 65,000 range, which would be a pretty decent clip. That's another 35% above current levels, and would indicate a continued bullish run in Bitcoin to the upside. Option two is that we remain above 43,000. We remain above the 200-day moving average most likely. We sort of fluctuate in this level. We don't really regain the new highs. We don't accelerate to the upside. We've had enough of a run, and going from 30 to 45,000 has been a pretty significant move already. So we sort of just settled in, and what used to be resistance around 42 to 44,000 now becomes support. And this blue shaded area is sort of the new floor in the market. It's the new 30,000. It's the new pink shaded area that gives you a level at which you expect buyers to come in. So that is the run has been made, basically. We might go a little higher, but overall, we're going to settle into this range for a little while. Option three, the third option is we settle back out down into this range. We go back into this 30,000 to 42,000 range. This breakout becomes what's called a failed breakout, which you see a move to new swing highs that doesn't really, it's not really maintained. You don't really get the follow through, and we fail back and go back into this range. We continue this range bound environment, testing support and resistance that has proven pretty stable. If you want examples of what that might look like, look at the chart of Amazon, where you had a breakout out of a base, and then it came right back down to earth. Option four, the fourth option would be the bearish option, which is we come back in the range, but we don't stop at 30,000. We actually go lower. We really continue this downtrend. And this whole phase is more of a pause, a halfway point after the sell-off from 65 to 30. We've chopped around here for a while. We're now at the upper end. We rotate back lower. We may bounce off of 30,000 or so, but eventually we continue lower and go maybe in the mid to low 20s. Those are the four different scenarios. And just to review, option one is sort of the bullish scenario, going to retest the previous highs at least, and anything above that sort of follows into that option one. Option two would be more of a sideways move. Let's say we don't get above 52,000. We sort of remain in this general range, but what's important is we hold support at 42,000. We don't get below there. Option three would be more of the range bound scenario between 30 and 44,000, sort of settle back into this range that has been the story for Bitcoin for the last couple months. Option four would be the bearish scenario, which is we go back in the range, but we don't hold 30,000. And surprising everyone, we break to new all-time lows for the last year. All-time low is a horrible way to say it. New lows for 2021 as we break below 30,000 and continue down to the mid to low 20s. Those are the four scenarios. Take a vote in the comment section below and tell me which of those four do you think is most likely and why. So that's it. The gauntlet is cast. I throw it back to you. You have four potential outcomes for Bitcoin over the next, we'll call it 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, sort of loose. And again, with timing, I think it's less. I think it's more of that intermediate term time frame, a couple months out. Which of those four scenarios do you see most likely? The very bullish version going back to retest the previous highs at 65,000, the somewhat bearish reaction of undercutting the previous lows around 30,000, or one of those two scenarios in the middle where we continue to digest some of the volatility that we've had. I certainly have an opinion. I have one of those four that I think is most probable, and I'm going to record another video soon on this channel where I tell you which of the scenarios I see as most likely and why from a technical perspective. But for now, give me a vote below and tell me which of those four do you think is most likely. Also want to remind you of this sort of thinking about charting, technical analysis, behavioral finance, investor decision-making, breadth, sentiment, trend, momentum, all of that is important to you. I hope you'll subscribe to my channel. It'd be great to have you along this ride. Also, give the video a thumbs up if you appreciated it. We would very much appreciate that back. Don't forget to put a comment below and tell me which of the four scenarios you see as most likely and why. From everyone at Market Misbehavior, I'm Dave Keller. Be well, stay safe. Talk to you again soon.